Thailand, one of Asia's most dynamic economies. Civil unrest is threatening to tear the country apart again. The crisis has been painted as a battle between the educated middle class and the rural poor. But is the problem really so simple?
The first thing is I think the country has been held back by rampant corruption.
การเมืองในประเทศไทยวันนี้ไม่ใช่เป็นประชาธิปไตยมันเป็นประชาธิปไตยแบบหุ่นเชิด
Why are we protesting now and why are we doing it in this manner? So the protests have now started. My name is Ben Bunya and I am a Thai journalist based in Bangkok. To find the answers, I embark on an investigative mission to understand the crisis from the perspective of the anti-government players themselves. Thai politics and Thai society are highly complicated. Is there more than meets the eye to this current protest? For the third time in 3 years, popular protests have crippled Bangkok. This year, led by a group called the People's Democratic Reform Committee, or the PDRC, tens of thousands of Thais, many from the educated middle class, have taken to the streets. But what's baffling the world are the protesters' demands. They want to abolish the elected government in favor of an appointed council. Protest leaders have even suggested that they would welcome a military coup to achieve their aims. I take my investigation to the streets. Just what is driving Thais to march out against the government? This is the Ratchaprasong intersection of Bangkok, which has been taken over by supporters of the PDRC. They're around in multiple locations around Bangkok with the aim of shutting down the city. Can I ask why are you out here today?
This is not fight for myself, right? This is fight for our state of Thailand.
Okay, and what's at stake?
We totally object to the corruption at all, so we are here for this purpose.
We don't think that the current government is a legitimate corruption scandal and rise market scheme that which we think is not effective and also destroy the budget of the country.
But don't you think that by coming out and protesting across the whole of central Bangkok, you're causing problems for Thailand's economic competitiveness?
I think this is the short-term, problem affecting the economy, because on the long run, if this government is running the country, it will permanently destroy the country in the long run.
So what would you say to people who would argue that the current government was legitimately elected?
Even though they are legally legitimate, but they are not morally legitimate. But this is a hard way the Thai people must learn from the current situation, so it will be the turning point for the Thai society.
Protesters claim that the current government, under Yingluck Shinawatra and the Pheu Thai Party, is corrupt, using populist policies that appeal to its rural supporters, but that bankrupt the nation. One of the biggest issues at hand is this: rice, a crucial commodity to a huge percent of voting farmers in rural Thailand. However, critics are charging that the government is promoting a scheme to buy this rice off of farmers for 50% above market price, at the expense of the economy. Dr. Gampon Adirek Sambat is an economist who can shed some light on Thailand's losses.
When they sell to the world market, they cannot sell at a very high price, so there's a loss there. We also calculate the loss. What we find is it will be about 100 billion to 150 billion baht a year. Even we can boost domestic consumption by raising those farmer income. We are struggling with rice export now.
These policies have incensed Thailand's middle class, as the government loses some $50 million on the rice mortgage scheme.
Get out ชินวัตรก็คืออยากจะให้
ตระกูลของชินวัตรได้ออกจากประเทศไทยไปเลยครับ
Others have also attributed the anger on the streets to a controversial attempt by the Yingluck government to pass a political amnesty bill.
ล้างผิดไปที่ชายมันที่ศาลพิพากษาแล้วว่าได้ทำความผิดใช้อำนาจหน้าที่โดยไม่ชอบโกงชาติโกงแผ่นดินมีโทษต้องจำคุก2 ปีและถูกยึดทรัพย์ 46,373 ล้านมันก็จะล้างผิดให้
The amnesty bill triggers fears that former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra might return to Thailand, and then he might take charge of the government again. He might stand in an election. So this is something that I think aroused the silent majority.
Yingluck Shinawatra may be Thailand's first female prime minister, but the story really starts with her brother, Thaksin Shinawatra. Thaksin came to power in 2001 and was one of the first Thai politicians to effectively garner the support of the rural north. But it was his methods of doing so that have come under fire from critics. Opponents slammed Thaksin for pursuing policies to buy over the poor at the expense of Thai taxpayers. But for political analyst Gan Yoon Yong, the economic argument against the Shinawatras is contradictory. As Thaksin was hailed as the solution to the nation's woes in the 1997 financial crisis.
At that time, the government, they could not succeed resolve the country from financial crisis. People view Kun Thaksin as a very successful business tycoon, so they just support.
For some, Thailand's economic achievements under Thaksin remain undisputed. Within 2 years of coming to power, Thailand's economic growth rose from 2.1% to 6.8%. So why are some still so opposed to Thaksin?
The time passed by, and then now the elite people just realize that Kun Thaksin will not only resolve the country's financial crisis, but also redefine and rechange country overall scheme and system. They feel that will destroy their own benefit and their own influence in the society.
In 2006, Thaksin's new order so incenses his opponents that they remove him in a military coup. But they can't keep him out. The popular vote returns his sister to power 5 years later. Is the current crisis just a reaction to the Shinawatras being in power, or is the opposition truly seeking reform? December 2013. Yingluck Shinawatra has dissolved parliament as anti-government protests bring Thailand to a standstill. But protesters remain unmoved and have boycotted Yingluck's call for fresh elections. The PDRC have rejected fresh elections as a solution to the crisis. But is that a decision that is shared by the government's other opponents? To find out more, I shift my investigation to the main political opposition in government, the Democrat Party. I travel to the party's headquarters, where they will be making an official stand on whether to contest in the upcoming polls. The Democrats have not won in 3 elections against the Shinawatras since 2001. Would this colour the action that they will take? Gathered here at the party headquarters are also many anti-government protesters. They are petitioning the party to boycott the elections.
So he believes that the Democrat Party will listen to the protesters' request not to run in the general election. And what he's saying is that these protesters here, they're not against a general election in principle, but really what they're after is reform first, get rid of corruption, and then go ahead with the general election in order to make sure that it's run fairly.
Leading the press conference is former Prime Minister Apisit Wechashiwa, who headed the Democrat-led government in 2008. But are the Democrats working with the People's Democratic Reform Committee? Will they accede to the PDRC's request for a boycott? And if they do, what does that suggest?
เราก็จะตกอยู่ในสภาพที่ปัญหาการเมืองที่ล้มเหลว
The Democrats have just announced that they are not going to run in the February 2nd general election and they will boycott these elections. Now, the reasons they've given for this boycott are that they're worried about the level of corruption in the current political system. That's the reason they've given, but is that in fact the truth behind why they're not running?
The Democrat Party's decision creates a political stalemate. It also suggests that the party may be cooperating with the PDRC's boycott.
We have decided not to participate in the upcoming elections. We feel that the elections cannot provide answers for the country's problems right now.
Right, so you don't think that maybe you're denying the Thai people of democratic process?
No, I think the people have spoken very clearly. The people who support us feel that by participating in the elections, we are only prolonging the problems of the country.
And does this mean you agree with the views of the PDRC?
Not everything, no. We are certainly in agreement that Thailand needs reform. We do not support any move towards reform that is unconstitutional. We do not in any way say that we would want to stop the elections. The elections have to go ahead. We just decide that this election is not for people who want reform.
Apisit's refusal to identify with the protest leaders seems to suggest that even within the anti-government camp, there may be conflicting viewpoints. It may not be as simple as a case of yellow versus red, but that does not rule out the possibility that the Democrats are in coordination with the protest leaders. I decide to dig deeper into the main leader behind the ongoing protests, Suthep Thaugsuban. Suthep Thaugsuban served as Deputy Prime Minister under Apisit Wechashiwa, a key member of the Democrats before stepping down to head the PDRC and the street demonstrations.
เดินไปตามถนนทุกสายมุ่งหน้าไปทำเนียบรัฐบาลเพื่อไปประกาศเอาอำนาจประชาชนคืนมาจากพวกโจร500ของระบอบทักษิณ
But exactly how is Suthep proposing to change the system?
Mr. Suthep, what is the point of the protest today? What is the point of this protest?
หลักใหญ่ๆก็คือว่าเราจะต้องแสดงพลังของมวลมหาประชาชนที่มหาศาลจริงๆเพื่อที่จะทวงคืนอำนาจอธิปไตยกลับมาเป็นของประชาชนแล้วก็ทำการปฏิรูปโครงสร้างการเมืองการปกครองซึ่งมีสาระสำคัญที่จะเอื้อต่อการพัฒนาประเทศและการทำให้ประเทศไทยเป็นประชาธิปไตยที่สมบูรณ์เช่นการกระจายอำนาจการปกครองให้ผู้ว่าการจังหวัดทุกจังหวัดมาจากการเลือกตั้งด้วยการปรับโครงสร้างตำรวจไม่ให้เป็นรัฐตำรวจแต่ว่าเป็นตำรวจที่อยู่ภายใต้การกำกับดูแลของประชาชนในแต่ละพื้นที่อย่างนี้เป็นต้นซึ่งมีงานหลายอย่างต้องทำไม่สามารถจะทำได้ในสมัยที่รัฐบาลหรือสภามาจากการทุจริตการเลือกตั้งหรือการซื้อคะแนนเสียง
There are a couple of things that Kun Suthep Thaugsuban, the leader of the People's Movement, have been calling for. The number one issue is that he would like to get rid of the countries of the Thaksin regime, once and for all. And secondly, he would like to find ways to end corruption, political corruption. For example, any Thais, who has found that any politicians, might have committed corruption, can go directly to the court and then file the complaints. And he also mentions about decentralization. For example, provincial governors, will have to be elected, by the people living in that particular provinces rather than being appointed by the Interior Ministry.
Suthep's solution is an unelected People's Council that will revamp Thailand's electoral system. It echoes the Democrat Party's call for reforms before any elections. But in essence, what are these reforms targeted at?
When I listen to Kun Suthep, it seems that they just try to reduce the influence from Kun Thaksin and Pheu Thai party from the election process. If they want to do that, they need kind of unelected government first in order to change the government. But they call that reform.
It's a political movement that's trying to lead to the coup or to create a situation that leads to the coup, because it's a political movement that tries their best not to cooperate with the system and trying to make the system not working.
If you take a look back to 2006 coup d'etat, the same thing, but at that time they used the military, but this time they just use the people.
Is this crisis an attempt to repeat the 2006 coup that ousted Thaksin and reboot the Thai political system? Is the current crisis a coordinated effort to radically reshape Thailand's political system? And what kind of reforms are the opposition pursuing? I score a second interview with Democrat leader Apisit Wechachiwa. Obviously, reform right now is the buzzword of the moment, but what exactly is the reform that Thailand needs?
Well, the first thing is I think the country has been held back by rampant corruption. Systematic corruption, which relates to aspects of political and governmental affairs. The reform that I think people most want is to return honesty, integrity to the political system. I think the details of what need to be changed need active discussions and of course participation from people. But for reform to go ahead, you must first have credibility and trust. That's something politicians at the moment don't have. And that's why people are saying that they don't think the 2nd of February elections would provide the answers. If you go back to the history, you will find that the root cause of the problem has been fraud, corruption, abuses of power.
And do you have any contact with Kun Suthep right now? Do you have any control over his actions?
Oh no, they are an independent movement. When they decided to give up their seats in parliament to basically lead the protest, I think it was clear that they felt that their direction and the party cannot be one and the same. Of course, our supporters are the people who are most likely to participate in these protests, but we have been very insistent that any participation should be according to the constitution, peaceful protest.
The Pheu Thai party and its partners have dominated the polls through their support base in northern Thailand, a region that makes up nearly 45% of the Thai popular vote. Could the reforms demanded by Suthep and the PDRC be targeted at this?
ที่ไม่ได้ทำความเข้าใจกับการเมืองในประเทศไทยอย่างลึกซึ้งสื่อต่างประเทศหรือชาวต่างประเทศคิดเพียงแต่ว่าถ้าเป็นรัฐบาลที่มาจากการเลือกตั้งนั้นต้องเป็นรัฐบาลที่ชอบธรรมแต่ไม่ได้ลงไปลึกไปว่าเป็นรัฐบาลที่มาจากการโกงการเลือกตั้งเป็นรัฐบาลที่มาจากการซื้อเสียงซื้อคะแนนเสียงจากประชาชนซึ่งไม่ใช่การเลือกตั้งที่บริสุทธิ์
But to loosen the Shinawat's grip on popular polls, some members of the PDRC are even suggesting a drastic overhaul of Thailand's election process.
Because they assume that Pheu Thai voting base are grassroots people, so that people are quite poor, they spend no tax, they have very low educational level. Some of them propose that they will change the voting basis from just one man, one vote. Maybe they will change to like they will consider from the tax spending, or they will consider from the educational level.
While this may not reflect the views of the PDRC leadership, some fear that the movement is heading towards a more radical direction. These fears are echoed by the Democrat Party.
The first weeks of Kun Suthep movement, the terminology was about change. Then later it turned into reform. And now we hear more of the word revolution. We cannot go into Kun Suthep's group because it will be deemed that we are a revolutionary force and we are not a political entity that must move within the confines of the rules of law.
The PDRC and the Democrat Party may not agree on the kind of reforms that Thailand needs, but their actions have set in motion a process that will redefine the nation. Next week, we follow Yingluck Shinawatra as she heads north to meet her supporters.
The best way to handle the conflict is wait for the people to vote of the new elections. But if the protesters keep protesting and keep to ask government to give the power to just of the group of the people, so I think it's not fair for the majority of the people.
What is the strategy of the red shirt factions to counter these protests? Will they take to the streets of Bangkok, and if so, will it spark a repeat of the military crackdown in 2010?
แล้วถ้าเกิดออกมาจริงๆนะครับออกมาประท้วงมันเป็นไปได้ไหมว่ามันจะมีสงครามกลางเมืองเกิดขึ้น
มันแน่นอนอยู่แล้วครับถึงแม้พวกเราจะออกมาแสดงพลังแต่พวกเขาเตรียมการเรื่องอาวุธไว้แล้ว